What's up, MC Marcus Chapman here, ready to break down show number 12 in the MC25. The show is called Why Are Record Stores Closing? This was done on December the 3rd, 2006 on WGCI in Chicago. And here's the backstory. All right, so this was a Sunday afternoon, and at that time, I normally worked Sunday 2 to 6. But this particular show is Sunday from 11 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon because the GCI had a gospel show that aired, I believe, started like maybe 8 in the morning till 11. And then Sundance came on from 11 to 2. And then I came on from 2 to 6. But Sundance was off that day, so I worked her shift. And since I came in at 11, I left an hour earlier. And Cool Out normally came on after me from 6 to 10. And he came in an hour earlier. So I was on 11 to 5. Now, I had worked at GCI, of course, in the 90s, from 95 to 99. I'd gone to Indianapolis, gone to Dallas, came back in August of 2002. And in March of 2004, I ended up leaving the station. I had kind of a falling out with management, didn't see eye to eye on some things. And I didn't leave Chicago, although I intended to at the time. I was up for a gig in LA, but I changed my mind on that. And then I was going to go to Atlanta too after that, but that didn't end up working out. So I was still in Chicago, I just wasn't on the air. Then in August of 2006, I ended up working there again. Had that not happened, that little middle part, which ended up being like 2.5 years, didn't seem like it, but it was like 2.5 years. If that time of absence hadn't been there, I probably would have been doing afternoons. At least there's a good chance I would have had afternoons, which is what I really wanted to do, but I wasn't really getting that kind of attention when I was there, so I don't know, who knows. Anyway, I was doing Saturdays and Sundays, and one of the things that I really didn't want to do when I started working there that third time, I didn't want to be simply known as like the Saturday night party dude who got the party started on Saturday. I wasn't really trying to do that, but when I came back in 2006, that was the first shift I got put on was Saturday night 6 to 10, and I really didn't want to do that, but I wasn't really in no position to argue either. I also wasn't in position to argue about my name. One of the people in management felt that I shouldn't use MC in front of my name because it was a dated hip-hop term, and they were afraid they were losing young audiences, which I thought was absolutely stupid because nobody was going to turn off the radio because they heard me say MC in front of my name. Like, oh no, I'm going to have to turn now, whatever. That's the type of stuff you got to deal with sometimes. So while I was doing the Saturday night show, I was really kind of looking out to see what other shifts I could do because I wanted to expand beyond that style of radio where it was just energy and parties type stuff. I had gotten a subscription to the Sun-Times at that point, the newspaper here in Chicago. One of them, people know the Tribune a little bit more, maybe around the country, but the Sun-Times has always been a little bit more popular here with a lot of people. I had a subscription to that. I was watching the news a lot more, and I wanted to be able to incorporate topics that I felt were more important to the audience than just, simple stuff. And so I started looking out for ways I could do that. Well, the first shift that I got that gave me a chance to expand my role and do a more topical style of radio was the Sunday afternoon 2 to 6 show. So this is the first of 4 shows that I did that come from a playlist that I have on YouTube called Thoughtful Content 2006-2007. Because I was doing Sunday afternoon, and then I eventually started doing Saturday morning, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So this is the first of 3 Sunday afternoon shows and first of 4 of these what I call thoughtful content shows that make the MC25. Now this one has probably the least, it's not really a serious subject necessarily, why record stores are closing, but it was one that was really important to me because the record store is my favorite place in the world. I say this on the show. I've been going to record store since I was 4 years old. It was always my favorite place, still is, even to this day. And right around the time when I did this show, I was starting to notice that a lot of them were shutting down, because this is when people were starting to not buy music anymore. It was starting to go to different things with downloading, and some people were downloading stuff for free, some people was paying for it. People were still buying, bootleg CDs that had a lot to do with it. So the whole genesis of the show came from me getting off the air the day before that, because I was working Saturday morning, like I said. And I remember leaving that morning and driving downtown, and I saw where there was a guy outside with some kind of sign or something, and basically Tower Records downtown Chicago was closing. And I had gone there many times and picked up stuff. So that set it off. And then also I had gone, there's a strip, or there used to be a strip on the north side of Chicago on Clark Street, like about 2600 North, where you had Secondhand Tunes, which later became known as Dave's. You had Dr. Wax, you had Hi-Fi, and a little bit further up you had Gramophone. And so Hi-Fi was probably my favorite one out of them. And I had gone to Hi-Fi around that time, and they had closed. They were closing down. I was like, man, what's going on? All the stores closing up. And I knew that was happening in a lot of places, and the stores that were still open were struggling. So I brought that to the air, and I wanted the listeners to tell me why record stores were closing. I phrased it a couple of different ways. I said why music stores are closing, why music stores are going out of business, or why record stores are going out of business. However I phrased it, the idea was the fact that people were starting to not buy music anymore. And so you hear the listeners give different reasons. A lot of them felt like the music itself just wasn't quality enough to buy, or they got tired. People got tired of buying CDs, paying all this money, and then when they got them, it was only a couple of good songs and it was a lot of garbage. And I think that really started around 1998, where the music industry started really padding a lot of these CDs with a lot of crap. And it came back to bite them. This was around the time in 2006 when it started to come back to bite them. And it's interesting to hear this show, 11 years later, because you hear what people said, why they weren't buying, or why other people weren't buying music, and why the stores were closing. And you can kind of compare that to what actually ended up happening. A lot of the stuff they said was true at the time. One thing nobody really said, because we didn't really think of it as much, they talked about download music, but now a lot of times people just stream stuff, and streaming wasn't really an option at that time. Even like with YouTube was out in 2006, but you didn't really have a lot of songs on there right away. And that's changed. So you could just pull up stuff on YouTube. We got the Spotify and the Pandoras and all this other tune-ins, apps for the whatever. It's like, it's so many different options. A lot of times people just pull up stuff on their phone now. But at that time in 2006, it was when it was really starting to change from people purchasing CDs, which were the dominant form of music, and had been, since probably like mid-90s. And now, by this point in 2006, people wasn't buying the CDs no more. They just felt they got tired of getting ripped off, and it came back to bite the music industry, because people started finding alternative ways to get their music, whether it was bootlegs, whether it was, the downloading for free, or whatever, getting stuff from friends, whatever method they use to get their music. So it's really interesting to hear this show. And you hear me doing some other stuff, like in the beginning, before it got to that feature that I had, what I asked these questions, was called the 3 o'clock thought. I would introduce that right before the 3 o'clock hour. But since I started at 11 that day, when I was doing the Sundance portion of the show from 11 to 2, which is covered for about the first maybe 12 minutes of the clip, you don't really hear, any features, but you hear some really interesting calls. One girl called, asked for the group Pretty Ricky's phone number as if it was one person. And it's funny because there's some footage of me working in the studio where I got filmed one day on, this is from March 17th of 2007. That same girl called that day and asked if I could get Pretty Ricky to come to her school. So it's weird she's on this show as well. So you hear that, you hear me interacting with the callers. One thing I noticed is that most of the people who called me by name. Like when I answered the phone, like, Marcus Chapman, so is this Marcus Chapman? Like they knew me. They really felt like they knew who I was, because they had heard me previously, and we had that kind of connection. And I'm really proud of that, because sometimes people can sound anonymous on the air, and I was never a person who did that. So this particular show, why record stores closing, I really enjoy it. It was a case of me taking something that I noticed, just being on the streets and something that I loved in my personal life and sharing that with the listeners and giving them a chance to weigh in and give their opinions. So check it out. It's show number 12 in the MC25 Why Record Stores Closing from December 3rd, 2006. And up next, show number 11 is one from another market. That's a very, very important show in the history of my career. I can't really say why record stores closing is important, which is why it probably isn't a little bit high, because it sounds damn good. But there's some more important shows that also sound good coming up further along as we go into get down closer to number 1 in the MC25. And number 11 is an important show. But right now, check out number 12, Why Record Stores Closing, December 3rd, 2006 on WGCI Chicago, MC Marcus Chapman. Yeah.